morning and hello.
Good morning, everyone. As you're entering, we welcome you to this year's Fall Financial Aid Training sponsored by Vermont Student Assistance Corporation. And we do have a poll question up for you to answer as you come in. We are going to wait just a minute as we get people into the Zoom meeting. We have more than 100 registrants today. So we appreciate your patience as we're getting things up and moving.
Carrie, would you like to give this just a couple more minutes, or would you like me to start?
Marilyn, I think we're ready to get started.
Perfect. I always like to reward people who come on time. So Chris, if you think we have a good number of, perfect, thank you. All right. Perfect. This is great. So thank you so much for letting us have some insight into what you are most interested in hearing about. So first, let me thank all of you for attending today. My name is Marilyn Cargill. I am the Vice President of Financial Aid Services, Marketing, Research, and Public Affairs here at VSAC. As some of you may realize, this presentation is in two sections. In the first section, I'll be co-presenting with Patrick Leduc and Kirsten Bohm, who will both introduce themselves when they are about to speak. We'll take a short break, which Carrie will help us with, and then Carrie and Stacy will take us through the second session. Carrie, on questions, we want them to enter their questions in the chat. Is that how we're going to handle that? Because I don't see the Q&A on my screen.
Yes, Marilyn, that's correct. We'd love people to ask questions in the Q&A section. We do have someone monitoring that. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Susie Wagner, for jumping in and doing that. So some questions might be answered there in the chat, but we will also have Susie bring that up, especially if she thinks it'll be useful for a number of other people.
Perfect. So let's go ahead and get started. Chris, if you could move me forward, that would be wonderful. So in order to understand some of the things we're going to talk about today, it's really important to understand the context that the state of Vermont finds itself in. And that will help you understand where some of the state's assignments to VSAC are coming from and where some of our focus is arising from. So as this slide is telling you, we've talked about this a lot, 53% of Vermont's working age Vermonters have a post-secondary credential. And so that's what we know to date. But 100% of Vermont's jobs by 2028 that are high growth, high wage jobs will require education and training after high school. So we are moving rapidly to a place where we need a much more significant portion of the state to have credentials and degrees beyond high school. And when we look at how we are actually doing against those statistics, as you know, VSAC does, many of you know, I don't know if you all do, but many of you do. We run surveys over high school classes every other year to understand both their enrollment patterns, their aspirations, what they are planning to do, and then follow them to see what they actually end up doing. Only 26% of first generation boys, that's boys whose neither parent received a college degree, only 26% of those boys had received a 2 or 4 year degree 6 years after graduating from 2012. So there is a whole population of Vermonters that are being left behind when we look at those high growth, high wage positions. Chris, can you move me forward? Perfect, thank you. So there are a number of different programs that we are going to focus on today. We're going to try to spend our time on some of the newer initiatives, but I'll very briefly say, I'm hoping that most of you are familiar with our Vermont grant program. If not, this is something that Carrie and Stacy will be talking to you about a little bit later. VSAC does administer over $6 million in scholarship funds in addition to our state grant programs. We administer loans. I want to talk a little bit, not about our loan programs, but about the services we offer to Vermonters who are borrowing money, whether they're borrowing from us or not. That's going to be very important based on what's about to happen coming out of this pandemic and the return to payments that students will be facing. We also have a higher ed investment plan that I want to talk about just for a few moments when we get to that slide. And then I'll be turning it over to Patrick and Shearston, who will talk about some of the career and education wellness, aspiration projects we're working on, our counseling efforts, and some of the access and information services that we provide. So, Chris, if you can move me forward again. The first new program I want to talk about, and I think many of you are familiar with this program, certainly I hope everyone from the high schools this looks familiar to. Green Mountain Grad is a program that was created by the Vermont legislature during the last legislative session. It was modeled after the McClure Foundation program from the year before. What this program does is it offers a free course at any of the Vermont state college system schools, Northern Vermont University, Lyndon or Johnson, VTC, Castleton University, or the Community College of Vermont, to any graduating high school senior from the classes of either 2020 or 2021. So that program that they took a class in could be part of their degree program on that campus. It could be a one-off class just because they wanted to explore something. It could be an in-person class. It could have been an online class. So far, 1,500 students have received Green Mountain Grad Awards, and that has been to the tune of about $1.8 million. There is still money in this program, and you will see us going out again in the fall and early winter timeframe encouraging students who have not yet taken advantage of this, who graduated in either 20 or 21, that they can still do this for the spring semester. This program does end on June 30th of 22. So it's important, if they're interested in doing this and they haven't yet, that they start looking at programs for the spring semester. Another program that the legislature created is called 802 Opportunity. One of the things that the state and VSAC are very worried about is making sure that low and moderate income families have access to higher education. And as we all know, the financial barrier to higher education is usually the one that families talk about the most. And we know there's other barriers, right? We get that, but that financial barrier comes up very, very frequently from families. So what the legislature did is they created a program so that any Vermont family, and I'm going to define family in just a moment, but any Vermont family with an adjusted gross income of $50,000 or less could attend, or their student could attend, a course at CCV tuition free. And that would be, when we look at the amount of VSAC grant they're eligible for, the amount of federal Pell Grant they're eligible for, their Green Mountain Grad gift, and then 802 Opportunity. If that family's income is $50,000 or less, they will not pay tuition to go to CCV. So that's going to take, I hope, that financial barrier right off the table for those families. Now, I also want to acknowledge, as we all know, tuition is not the only expense. They may have to pay fees for particular courses. So for example, if you're taking a lab course, which happens to be the picture we're showing with this slide, there would be a lab fee and the student would be responsible for that. They're also responsible for their books. But the tuition charge itself and the $100 administrative fee that every student faces for fall and spring enrollment is covered by this program. This program started September 1. Right now, there are 2,085 students who currently are offered funding at CCV that is making CCV tuition free for them. And that's between all those programs I mentioned, between VSAC, Pell, Green Mountain Grad, and 802 Opportunity. So we have over 2,000 Vermonters right now that are able to attend CCV tuition free. We're hoping to see even more students stepping up in the spring. This particular program is a 2-year program. So it's going to run for 21-22, and it's going to run again for 22-23. So if a student started full-time, and full-time being 15 credits in the fall of 21, and they kept that pace up, they could achieve their associate's degree without ever having to have paid tuition, as long as they meet those income criteria. So a couple of things about this that I just want to make sure that I mention. The programs that are covered are all of the credential and associate degrees at CCV. There are 33 different programs that are covered by this program. And students earning them, as you know, they could be getting a certificate, they could get an associate's degree. And because CCV has such strong articulation agreements with some of our other schools, such as UVM and the Vermont State College system, they can also transfer those credits and move towards a bachelor's degree. So there's a lot you can do from this starting point. It's one of the reasons that the legislature selected CCV. They had geographic diversity, so there's 12 sites around the state. They have a strong online presence, which makes those classes even more accessible to students. They were the most affordable school that we have in the state of Vermont, so that the funding could go a little bit further, and those strong articulation agreements. So between all of that, CCV was selected as the pilot site for this program. Oh, I know one last thing I meant to say. Thank you for not going on, Chris. You knew I had not defined family. I just wanted to take one moment for purposes of this discussion. When I say family income, if the student is a dependent student, and by dependent, they're under the age of 24, they're not married, somebody who recently graduated from high school, family will be their parent income. So whichever parent or parents, if they're married, needed to fill out the FAFSA, that is the income we will look at. If they are an independent student, an adult student who is going to school, we will look at the student income. And if that student has remarried, the spouse's income. So that is how family will be defined for purposes of this program. So it's very, very similar to what we're doing for all financial aid, and the way that the FAFSA is filled out will be how we determine the income that families have. Now I can move. Thank you, Chris. Another new program that VSAC is administering is the Vermont Nursing Workforce Incentive Loan. This is interest-free and forgivable. So this year, students are being offered $6,000 a year. They can use these for 1, 2, and 4-year nursing programs. And they can be used at any school within Vermont. They also can be used at schools outside of Vermont, but the student needs to agree that they will work in Vermont for 1 year for each year that they receive the scholarship. And this is a true workforce development program. The state is really trying to address the critical need for nurses within Vermont. Another scholarship that I'm hoping most of you are familiar with, but I just want to talk about it because we're not seeing it utilized as much as we'd like to. The Choose Vermont Scholarship was created 2 or 3 years ago by the state of Vermont to incent students to choose a Vermont school versus going out of state. And what they have done is they've partnered with VSAC and with the Vermont colleges, publics, privates, universities, colleges, and the school is putting up, and VSAC is putting up a $5,000 scholarship. So there's 13 scholarships coming from the institutions that are available. There is no essay, there's no letter of recommendation, there's no income requirement. This program is simply the matter of if you are going to a Vermont school for the very first time, you go to the state's website, which is on this slide, you fill in your name and address, and that's it. That is the application. And each school will draw their own recipient, and the state of Vermont draws a recipient for VSAC. Now, both in and out of state students can apply for this, but last year, just slightly over 300 Vermonters actually signed up for this scholarship. And I am certain there's a lot more than 300 Vermonters that attend all of our in-state schools. So this is just another place, if you've got students who are graduating from high school, students who are returning to Vermont, maybe they've gone out of state for a few years, now they're coming back to a Vermont school, they really should be looking into this scholarship. So hopefully this is one that we can kind of keep front of mind, because it's a pretty easy lift for every student to put their name in for. The dual enrollment early college stipend has been around for a long time, but we still get a lot of questions on it. So Carrie asked if I would just take a moment to talk about this particular program. The dual enrollment early college stipend is an award that is offered to eligible Vermont students who are using their dual enrollment voucher to take college courses while they are still enrolled in high school. So these students in their junior or senior year are taking 1 or 2 courses on a college campus, or maybe even in their high school. Sometimes they're offered on site, and they're having to pay for books, or in the case if they're going to the college, they may have transportation expenses. they can receive up to $150 stipend to help offset those expenses. The way that they qualify for this is, one, they're enrolled in a dual enrollment course, and two, the dual enrollment designee on the high school lets us know that we'll reach out to them to determine whether or not that student is eligible for free and reduced hot lunch. If they are eligible for this $150 stipend. The stipend is written as a check directly to the student so that they can purchase their books or have funds for gas and transportation. For the early college side of this, if a student is enrolled in early college, which means they're taking that senior year in high school and freshman year in college at the same time, if they're doing that program, they also are eligible to apply for the Vermont State Grant. If they are eligible for the Vermont State Grant, they will also receive the early college stipend, which is again $150 each semester that they are enrolled to help them pay for their books, transportation, fees, and any other expenses they might have.
Hey, Marilyn, before you go on, I think we have 1 or 2 questions on Choose Vermont.
Perfect.
Could you just talk about, is it 1 award per school, the criteria that are used to determine it?
So it's 1 award per school. So each school that is participating, and 13 Vermont institutions are participating, put in a $5,000 scholarship. They made that available. The only criteria is that when you go to the state website, you put in your name, your address, its contact information, as well as the college that you will be attending. The state is going to verify with the college that you actually are attending their institution. And then once the school has said, yes, this student is definitely considering our institution, they've accepted our admission, we expect them on campus, then the school will look at the list of names. I'm making this up, but there's 100 students that are interested in going to the University of Vermont. They're going to draw one of those names. So it's not a competitive process in that it's for someone with really good grades or it's for somebody who's low income. It's none of those things. It is simply a way to encourage Vermonters to consider Vermont institutions. And it's just another incentive to get them to do that.
And is it for the first year?
Yes, this is
only.
It is for students who have never attended a Vermont institution. So I want to be careful how I answer this question because you only can receive 1, because after you've received 1, you've attended a Vermont institution. You can only receive 1, but it's not necessarily only for high school students. You could have an upper class student who's transferring to a Vermont school for the very first time, who could also receive this. So there's other students that are eligible to apply, but any Vermonter who's attending a Vermont institution for the very first time should be checking out that website.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. I'm watching, Susie, just the numbers. I'm trying not to read the questions so I can see you're busy, but let me know if there's anything you'd like me to take on. I have great confidence that you can answer them all.
Great, thanks, Marilyn.
So emergency microgrants. This is another program that's relatively new for Vermont. A few years ago, in talking to Vermont colleges and universities, there was a concern raised that students were stopping and dropping out of school, not because of big expenses, not because they couldn't pay their bill, but because small unexpected things had occurred. The dog hit the edge of the coffee table, their laptop went flying and broke in half. We've had food insecurities, people whose car blew a tire and they could not afford to replace it. VSAC created a micro grant program to try to address that, to see if we could set up a program of small amounts of money. These are up to $400. Again, the check is written to the recipient, it does not flow through the school, to help them get through that emergency situation that just occurred. These applications turn around very quickly. Obviously, if you are missing class or need a laptop to go to a class, you don't have 2 or 3 weeks for somebody to work their way through this process. What is happening is the colleges or the outreach counselors are nominating students for these awards. And once they're nominated, normally within 2 to 3 days, a check is being sent to eligible students. So again, this is just another program to be aware of, especially if you're working on a college campus, that there are funds available for those small, unexpected things that are happening in a student's life. The thing that we have to remember, they really need to be an unexpected expense. It can't be, she's $400 short on her books, because books were always a known expense. But if all of a sudden a book that's never been asked for is being required, that would be a different situation. The expense is something that's going to keep them from being able to stay in school. That's the other criteria here. So it's an unexpected expense that would cause them to stop or drop out of school. The nomination form is completed by either the school staff member or one of our outreach counselors and sent to the VSAC grant program. And I think Carrie may talk about the details of how that happens a little bit later. But that is just another possible program to help ensure that Vermonters who start school stay in school and earn those credentials and degrees that they need in order to get the jobs we talked about at the beginning of this. One other thing I want to mention really quickly is that VSAC also recognizes that when families apply for financial aid, they're using their 2 years ago income, right? So for this current 21-22 year, we're looking at their 2019 income, which may be just fine for most families. But for a lot of families, things happen in the year that they're actually trying to pay for college. So in 2021, so this current year, things are going on that make 2019 look like it was a much better financial year for them. VSAC allows families to appeal and use their 2021 income rather than their 2019 income in this particular case. As you can see from these numbers, for a large number of years, our appeals were between 650 and 700 appeals year after year. Last year, probably no surprise to anyone, in the midst of that pandemic, we had almost 2,100 appeals. And this current year, this number has been updated. There's now over 950 students who have appealed their state grant. So again, if you have students who've already applied for financial aid, they're having a hard time paying their bill, what's going on in 2021 is very different than what occurred in 2019. Please encourage them to reach out to VSAC to see if their state grant can be reconsidered. Okay, a couple of programs I want to mention that are targeted to adults. There is a new program, again, this one was created by the legislature this past year. It is the CTE Scholarship, and CTE stands for Career and Technical Education Centers. So if we have adults that are attending career and technical education centers, they can receive up to $1,000 in a CTE training program. They do need to be nominated by one of VSAC's adult program counselors in our EOC program. They must also apply for the Vermont grant, whether that is a degree or advancement grant. Although I don't know why they'd apply for a degree grant if they are in a CTE program. So they must apply for the advancement grant. So I apologize for the error on that. The other program that we have for adults right now is called the Curtis Credential of Value Program. And again, this is looking for students who are not in the traditional degree programs, but are in credential programs, and it is up to $1,500 that they can receive to help offset the cost of those programs. They do need to have applied for a Vermont state grant so that we can ensure that they have financial need. All right, the Vermont 529 plan, I just want to touch on this very briefly. This is the college savings plan that VSAC runs for the state of Vermont. This program is an amazing success story for Vermont. As we all know on this call, saving for college is very preferable over borrowing for college. So time and interest help you when you save. Time and interest are not your friends when you borrow. The Vermont 529 plan is about 20 years old now. It currently has over $570 million that are sitting in the program, and over $265 million has been withdrawn by families to help pay for higher education. That means over $800 million of savings for higher education versus borrowing. So another program for just families to be aware of. You can read some of the benefits on the slide. I won't read those to you, but it's something that we encourage families to start saving in this program as early as they can and to take advantage of the tax benefits that Vermont offers. Chris, thank you. The only thing I want to say on this slide is that the entire country that it has loans with the direct loan program have been in suspended payment since March of 20. And I should say March of 2020. So we've been in suspended payment now for about 18 months. At the end of January, the Biden administration has said they all will go back into repayment. So what VSAC is offering, and I just want to make sure that if you get questions about this, you can feel very comfortable referring them to us. VSAC is offering to help any borrower. They don't have to have borrowed from VSAC. If they need help understanding the repayment options that are available to them, how to talk to their servicer about their loan and the situation they are still finding themselves in, please encourage them to reach out to VSAC. You'll be seeing some public service announcements on this, I believe, and some press releases on this, but we really want to make sure that Vermonters who need to talk through their loan options know that they can come to VSAC if they need to. VSAC is also offering a rehab program, thank you, Chris, that is allowing students who have previously defaulted on their loans, which has, as you know, a very large impact on their credit history. It also has an impact on their ability to get financial aid going forward. There are programs to help students rehab those loans, and that's another program we would just want you to be aware of so you could refer students back to VSAC if they have defaulted loans with us. Last but not least, I just want to mention that we have completed the study on the class of 2012. We'll be releasing that this fall, showing their 6-year completion stats. They're not great. So the little paper doll infographic on the side, for every 10 students who graduated from high school in 2012, after 4 years, about 3.4 of them had received a 2 or 4 year degree. And currently it's up to 4.6. So less than half of that class has a 2 or 4 year degree. And again, I'll take you back to the first conversation I started with, which was the context in which Vermont exists, where 100% of high wage, high demand jobs will require training beyond high school, and 70% currently do. So this is a problem, not just for this class, it's a problem for the state. I think we've talked about this before. Generation, whether or not your parents have gone to college, and gender matter. Boys are falling further and further behind as we track their progress. And the only other thing I want to mention, I'll do this very quickly, but not so quickly that I confuse people, which I did the last time I spoke about it. One of the other things we took a really good look at this year was what happens to students who plan to take a gap year. So this isn't about students who plan to go in the military or do something else with their careers. This is about someone who says, I am purposely taking a gap year and I'm going to start in the fall. So for the students who did that in 2012, their plan was to start school in 2013. Only 24% of the students who planned to take a gap year actually did that. And after 6 years, less than half of them had even enrolled. So our only purpose in highlighting this is that we know gap years are something that are popular with students. They can be popular with parents. It doesn't mean that gap years don't work. It means that gap years take really careful planning. So again, just something to be thoughtful about when you're working with students and when you're talking with families. So let me stop there and I will turn this over to Patrick.
Thank you, Marilyn, and welcome everybody. Good morning. Thanks for spending some time with us. I know you all have very hectic schedules with lots of accountability, so we really appreciate your time today. I am also a vice president here at VSAC. I oversee the career and education outreach services at the executive level, as well as I serve as the chief information officer, focused on all of the technology pieces and security, and I oversee human resources and the benefits programs that VSAC offers for its staff. I wanted to touch a little bit on a couple of things that have been mostly internal, but will be touching all of you as well at some point. VSAC, for a lot of good reasons, is very focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and have really enhanced our efforts in this area over the last 2 years, really. We've maintained a diversity, equity, and inclusion work group within our building, and we've done a lot of internal work to assess ourselves in this space, as I'm sure most of you have in your organizations at this stage. We continue to do our hard work internally to really focus on how do we serve Vermonters in the way that is authentic and true, regardless of their background. And really emphasize even more for the same point that Marilyn made a couple of times, and then I'll reiterate, is that 100% of the high wage jobs require some kind of post-secondary education. And so for VSAC to pursue its mission with that level of authenticity, we need to make sure that our programs and services serve all Vermonters in that way. So we've been doing a lot of work in that space. And really what I'd like you to take away from this slide is that we are now moving slowly toward the process of getting external input into that process. So we've done a lot of work internally, and we will continue to do that work, but we also need the lens of those that we serve and those that we partner with to help us really assess our programs and services and help us work through those processes where we may be creating barriers that we don't intend to. So hopefully we'll be chatting with some of you in the form of either a survey or potentially even some forum and conversations to help us kind of continue the work in that assessment. Carrie, can you move us to the next slide? Another area that we spend a lot of time on, as you can imagine in this world, is security. We accept and take very seriously the data that we have from all of you and from other partners as we serve our students, both the data that they give us directly and sometimes the data that our partners entrust us with. The cybersecurity world is a very, very challenging one. It always has been. It's definitely the bad actors are ramping up. Some of it spurred by the pandemic and the proliferation of devices in homes, and even just the psychological issues of kind of being in your home and sometimes being a little more casual because of the place that you're in. These bad actors are pretty strong in figuring out how to manipulate us all. So we continue to do work on that. And I think sometimes you as our partners will see that in how we protect the data in things like secure email, how are my VSAC login credentials and things like that work. And sometimes those things become a little bit of a challenge to us from an efficiency perspective. And we constantly have to strike, just like your organizations, that balance between the security of the data and the ease of use of the data at the same time. So we continue to work on that. And as we continue that work, you may see opportunities for us to kind of talk to you about enhancements in how we secure our credentials back and forth between U.S. partners and potentially even with our customers as we continue to kind of evolve our programs and services. So those are just some things to keep an eye on as our cybersecurity work continues. Go ahead, Carrie. And then connected with that in a very similar way is our safety protocols, something that you're all very familiar with in your own environments and how you interact with people now in the pandemic. At this point, VSAC is kind of doing what all of you were doing, kind of navigating the data. Marilyn and I and the rest of the executive committee meet on a weekly basis, and this is consistently on our radar as far as understanding what the current data is telling us we should be having for protocols, whether that be protocols for our outreach staff that are out in the field, whether it's the protocols of our staff coming into the building and whether they should wear masks, whether we should move toward a stronger stance on our vaccination policy. We're obviously, just like all your organizations, keeping an eye on federal things that may be coming down with the possibility of a mandate for vaccinations for employers of larger than 100. So we continue to monitor that and just want to, we'll keep the lines of communication open on that as we move forward and partner with you in those fronts. College and career pathways. Hopefully you're all familiar with this event. We've been running college and career pathways to serve the youth of our state for many, many years now. It's traditionally been 4 events or 3 events or 4 events, depending on what year we're talking about, across the state of Vermont, where we really have students come together and participate in workshops and have the ability to kind of get support from our staff. In 2021, we obviously moved that to a virtual event. We had really a great turnout just the same. We had 18 Vermont college and non-degree training providers with us in the virtual tours. We had 233 unique attendees. So we were really, really pleased with how much participation we had when we had to shift that to a virtual environment. And as you'll recall, if you're familiar with this program, we used to do this on the weekends, and we would kind of drive parents to come with their students. And we shifted a few years ago and started asking schools to work with us to bring students in during the weekday. And we've seen a really kind of encouraging set of energies associated with that. So we can build curriculum around that as a school. We can add some resources to your platforms at your schools to help them understand career and college readiness. And we get the energy of having a whole cohort of kids in there. Some of them sometimes not really sure they want to be there. But that exposure is really great. Those are the kids that maybe if we had it on the weekends, we used our traditional marketing and asked them to get their parents to bring them, may not show up. So there's a great opportunity for us to touch a few more people there. Go ahead, Carrie. Thank you. In 2022, we are currently planning for this to be an in-person event, similar to what we've done a couple of years ago, in 4 different spaces in Vermont. We are obviously planning for a potential switch to virtual if we need to, but right now we're hoping that we could do this in person. We see a lot of value in that. We will continue with our model of having Vermont high schools partner with us to bring students in for that event. And again, we target the 10th and 11th graders, but this is open to really the 9th graders and 12th graders that are still making those choices. We welcome everybody to this event. And we're also hoping that we'll have one Saturday event that'll be on a weekend where we will have families join us for those that really want, the parents really want to be involved and come in with their students. So we're looking forward to that. You can see the dates there. We're still nailing down some of the locations, but this will be another hopefully really encouraging program for our youth. Thank you, Carrie. Vermont Career Connect. This is formerly the Kingdom Career Connect. This is also an event that we moved to virtual, and we'll be keeping this one virtual in this coming year. The goal here is to help 7th and 8th graders think about their future and explore new possibilities. We do this through kind of partnering with businesses to get real life scenarios in front of the students. So what is it like to be an electrician? What is it like to be a web developer? Talking with on these virtual workshops of areas of interest for our students, especially in the middle school, starts to create those sparks for youth. Like, oh, that's what that job is. Maybe there's something I can do there. And that is a great lifting spot for having future conversations. The 2022 plan, as I mentioned, is going to be virtual this year. We are offering a career interest survey for people that want to participate in this, that they can do in advance. It'll be on October 20th from 10 to 11:15 with a virtual career panel focused on Vermont's most promising jobs. This is some of the McClure data that you've probably seen in the past. I think we've got electrician, dental resident, social work, small and web developer as some of the panelists that will be on that. So this should be an exciting program. And you can go to our website there, Vermont Career Connect, and get more information and share that with your peers that work directly with middle school students if that's not you. The Transition and Careers Conference is another great event that we've been hosting for a number of years now. This creates a really awesome opportunity for all of us as practitioners to be in the room together. This is something we partner with AOE and Voc Rehab and the School Counselor Association. It really is a great opportunity between the really practical idea-based stuff that this is what's been working in my school, and that kind of ability to kind of get together and brainstorm and innovate together. We take a good amount of time to kind of recharge, have some gratitude with each other about how challenging it is to do some of this work, even when we're not in a pandemic. This is really tough work, working with a lot of students that have other challenges and that we're trying to help them on the path. And so a lot of our practitioners carry a lot of weight with them and a lot of great ideas. And this is a great opportunity for us to all come together and talk through those things and learn from each other. Our 2022, on this one, we are planning on trying to do this in person. So this will be at the Snowflake Resort in Stowe. And our themes are really re-engagement, lessons learned from this entire process. How do we return from this isolation process? What are the silver linings that we want to continue to learn from and bring forward? So all these opportunities for learning and career exploration will be on the slate for this conference. And then our fall financial aid support programs. Obviously, our outreach counselors are out in the field working with students all the time, but we've got a number of virtual offerings that will continue that really kind of ramped up in a really big way during the pandemic, and we've seen them to be really effective for a lot of Vermonters. So we've got VSAC Shows You How programs that we'll be offering, the 529 College Investment Plan, how to file a FAFSA, and other events like that. We've also got some on how to upskill your career, how to compare award letters. So those are the types of topics that if you can go to our website, you'll see all the different options that'll be coming down the road. Obviously, our FAFSA help program is out there, one-on-one help from our counselors. These are Zoom sessions that people can schedule and get somebody to help them with. And we call them FAFSA Fridays internally in some of our marketing, but really we can help with FAFSAs any day of the week. So reach out to us and we can help. So let me turn this over to Kirsten for the next set of slides.
Great. Thanks, Patrick. It's so great to be with all of you this morning. I've seen so many familiar names and faces come through, people who even I think I've met via Zoom during this strange time. So it's good to be together with you. Thanks so much to Carrie Harlow for organizing us and all the hard work that she puts into this presentation, and Stacy King, who presents with her, and Chris Berry, who's behind the scenes organizing all of us and getting everyone registered, and Susie Wagner, who's been so helpful in answering all of your questions in the chat. My name's Kirsten Bohm. I'm the director of our Career and Education Outreach team at VSAC. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about our Career and Education Outreach programs. Hopefully you see yourself as a partner in one or most of these programs, because we really work in partnership to deliver all of these services. First, I want to talk about our Educational Opportunity Center program, EOC. This is our program that supports students of all ages, but we might think of them as adults sometimes, who are outside of the public school system, who might have minimal access to services. And this program is serving the 20,000 Vermont families who are living below 150% of the poverty level, and really helping those students to pursue some sort of post-secondary credential. There's also 75,000 Vermonters who have some post-secondary but no degree. And of course, many more Vermonters who completed high school, but are interested in pursuing post-secondary for the first time. So if you know a Vermont adult who is looking for help to go back to post-secondary or training and doesn't already have a bachelor's degree, the EOC team is ready to support that student. A lot of the financial aid programs that Marilyn Cargill mentioned earlier in her presentation can be a little overwhelming to think about navigating if you're an adult student going back for the first time. And the EOC counselors, and Susie and Stacy are here right now. Those counselors are just ready to help those students navigate that process. And there are a number of scholarships that students can access only by connecting with an EOC counselor. So we really, really encourage students to get connected with that program. And as you can see, there's really strong results for students who get connected with an EOC counselor and get that support. Additionally, as many of you know, in our career and education outreach team, we have over 20 staff who are counselors all across Vermont, serving over 80 Vermont middle and high schools, partnering with many of you to serve over 3,500 students annually in kind of a case model, case management model, where they are primarily serving students who are from a modest income background or might be the first in their family to go on to post-secondary education. This is our Gear Up and Talent Search programs, also federally funded primarily. And additionally, our Gear Up program serves another 300 students per year during their first year of post-secondary. We partner with many of you on these programs. Our Gear Up and Talent Search counselors are always welcoming and looking for recommendations of students who would benefit from participating in these programs. So if you have a VSAC outreach counselor in your school and you know of a student who would be a good fit for these programs, please just make that connection. We would love to have the opportunity to work with those students. It is Gear Up week this week. So if your school is a Gear Up school, we're celebrating that program that serves not only students across the state of Vermont, but nationally. Again, it's a federally funded program. So Gear Up programs exist in every state across the country. And Gear Up supports many of the programs that Patrick described earlier, our College and Career Pathways program, our Transitions Conference, our Vermont Career Connect. Those are all programs that Gear Up staffs and supports. And of course, you can see here at the bottom that there's very strong outcomes for students who participate in these programs, even in a bit of a challenging time during the pandemic. Essential Math for College and Careers is a really exciting program that's also come out of our Gear Up grant. It's a collaboration between the Vermont State College System, the Agency of Education, and VSAC, and it is born from research that shows that students who pursue remedial or developmental math courses in post-secondary are less likely to succeed in post-secondary and also incur debt and costs that don't necessarily provide the associated credits. It's a hands-on project-based math course with guided student discussion, and it's called Gradual Release, the model that's used in the course. And what's really exciting about it is that it was collaboratively developed by high school and post-secondary faculty together, and was taught in 8 high schools in the 1920 school year. Despite the challenges of COVID, we still had 3 schools that taught this new course last year, and we're excited that there are 7 schools teaching it again this year. Successful completion of this math course means that students can enroll in math courses at the Vermont State College System without needing to take the AccuPlacer or enroll in remedial math. We've seen really, really promising outcomes despite the challenging pilot environment that this has been delivered in. We survey students at the end of the course each year, and we've seen them reporting really positive feelings about math, which is not always the case among high school students. We've also seen modest but statistically significant increases in AccuPlacer scores, from a pre-test at the beginning of the course to a post-test at the end of the course, which is exciting as well. Yep, and just to say one last thing about EMC squared, sorry. If your school is interested in thinking about delivering this course at your school, there's a little website at the bottom there, vsac.org/EMC squared, which has all the information about how you could get connected and get a teacher prepared to teach this course at your school. Thanks, Carrie. So our whole school aspirations partnerships is another way that VSAC partners with schools in Vermont to support creating a culture and capacity around college and career readiness, post-secondary and career readiness. This is different from our Gear Up and Talent Search programs in that we're really working with the whole school and really focused on supporting faculty and staff to be engaged in this work, and school leadership. So often our aspirations programs are working on developing a school-specific college and career planning curriculum, a scope and sequence, so that all students who graduate from that school are exposed to college and career planning. And often our aspirations partnerships involve a significant kind of professional learning experience for school staff that's defined by the needs of that school. We usually engage in these partnerships for 3 to 4 years. It's a model that's designed to be really carried out sustainably by the school after the partnership. And so we wrapped up our partnership with Central Vermont Career Center this past year. We're continuing in partnership with Twinfield and Spalding High Schools, both incredible places to partner with. And we are onboarding Harwood Union School into this partnership this year. And just briefly, our VSAC Curriculum Map, we've been working hard on this in outreach. It's based on research plus years of experience, and it's kind of our special sauce. It's what a student in a VSAC outreach program can expect to get at the end of their experience with VSAC. So it's organized by grade level, and it describes for us internally and for you all externally the enduring understandings and skills that we consider important for students to be prepared for college and career opportunities after high school. And this is just an example of what it looks like. So for a student in grades 6, 7, and 8, for example, by the end of their time participating in 1, 2, or 3 years of support with a VSAC counselor, they should be able to understand, know, and do these things. And the way that this content is delivered is different in every school with every student based on the VSAC counselor that works with your school and the experience and the needs of your community and your students. But hopefully at the end of the day, they've gotten these skills and enduring understandings. And 2 interesting early college collaborations that VSAC is participating in this year, funded with generous support from the Vermont Community Foundation, their COVID-19 fund focused on learners in transition during the pandemic. One is Early College Plus, which is a collaboration between CCV and VSAC. So students, as you know, during early college, of course, complete their final year of high school and their first year post-secondary, but in this Early College Plus program, they also get a certificate during that year. There's 3 specific areas that CCV is offering this year: cybersecurity fundamentals, graphic design, and IT service desk specialist. This program has already started, so it's already underway for this year, but we're mentioning it because we want you to think about it for next year for students you work with if you're a school counselor or at a post-secondary institution. We want them to start thinking now about this possibility for next year. There's a $1,000 stipend associated with this program, which is not need-based. It's for anyone who participates in the program. And during the Early College Plus program, the student has access to a VSAC counselor to help them with their thinking about what's going to come next after that early college year at CCV. We're also engaged in a data review, collaborating between VSAC, the Agency of Education, and the Vermont State College System, exploring the data that exists since the beginning of the implementation of early college in 2014 to help to inform future practice and policy around early college. Here's our contact information, Marilyn, Patrick, and I. Please reach out to us with questions. We welcome them. We are over time per usual. Carrie, how much time would you like us to take for a break?
I am looking at the time. It is just short of 10 o'clock. If we could meet back up at 10:05, that might give folks time to get up, stretch their legs, maybe respond to an email or answer a student's question, and then we will start back up at 10:05.
So don't leave us, just mute yourself and walk away and come back.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone got the chance to enjoy a little bit that brief break and, get a sip of water, stretch your legs. We had a chance to reset our programs. My name is Carrie Harlow, and I'm a member of the Career and Education Outreach staff. And we're going to dive into the second part of this financial aid training and update. And some of the things we're going to talk to you about are some of the FAFSA and federal student aid updates. Boy, there are a bunch of them. We'll update you on things going on with Vermont grants. We might touch on a little bit that Marilyn covered, but she did such a great job. We just have a few things to add. We'll talk a bit about short-term training and certificate funding, as well as VSAC assisted scholarships. We'll cover some changes to education loans, and we will also give you access to a number of our information resources. As a reminder, we are taking questions in the chat. My colleague, Susie Wagner, is covering the chat, and she will be answering some basic questions, but she'll also be bringing other questions up to us. And Stacy King, who is another member of our Career and Education Outreach staff, will be co-presenting this section with me. And we're really looking forward to giving you these updates. So let's get started. It seems like every year that federal student aid likes to update their page, and you can see that there are some changes. One of the things is that when you go to studentaid.gov, there's a login or create an account link. And so that is a way that people will be able to apply for an FSA ID. And you can still get to the FAFSA by directly typing in fafsa.gov. And so we cover this each year. Why do we want families to complete the FAFSA? It's required for federal student aid programs, including if they just want, for instance, access to a federal student loan. It also is required for the Vermont Incentive Grant as well as part-time grant programs, and it could also be required for institutional financial aid as well as for scholarships. But let's be honest. When my colleagues and I are doing presentations, a lot of times families will either contact us, or when we were in person, they would talk to us and say, I don't think we're going to qualify, so why should I bother filling out this form? Well, I mentioned before that students can qualify for, low interest rate federal student loans, as well as work study or institutional aid or scholarships. Some colleges require that the FAFSA be filed in order to rule out all other sources of aid before they dip into their institutional resources. But the other reason to file a FAFSA is really to be able to communicate special circumstances to the college. For instance, changes in family income, a change in marital status, or additional expenses not reflected on the FAFSA. Having the FAFSA filed is the starting point to having those conversations with institutions. And so we recommend that families file a FAFSA in order to do that, or even as an insurance policy. If something were to change, having that FAFSA on file means you can start that conversation right off with their institution that they're working with, instead of having to, file the FAFSA and then have the conversation, or have the conversation and still have to file that FAFSA. There are 3 ways to file, and I have to say filing electronically is the way that more than 99% of FAFSA filers will submit their FAFSA. There's a PDF version on the FAFSA site, which students and parents can download and print, but ideally, the FAFSA should be done online, because you can use things like the IRS data retrieval, which helps lessen the possibility of being chosen for verification. And there's also logic built into the electronic ways of filing in order to help families prevent some common errors that might happen with filing the FAFSA. They also make sure that the FAFSA, as well as the mobile app, recognizes the ways that families file. Sometimes the student and parent are sitting there together filing the FAFSA, but sometimes it's the student filling out the FAFSA without their parent, or it's the parent filling out the FAFSA and their student's not there. I just wanted to show you the FAFSA website. I mentioned you can still type FAFSA.gov and get there. As you scroll down the main page, you can find FAFSA announcements like the recommendation to have federal aid adjusted if your family situation has changed. And also to make sure they have an announcement to also make sure that your browser allows pop-ups. It's really, really important for that. If your students wish to connect their FAFSA directly to the Vermont grant application. And new this year, it happened over the course of the year since our last presentation. You'll notice Aiden, that's that little owl in the lower right corner. He's the federal student aid chatbot, and he's also there to help answer questions and maybe point you in the right direction. And I mentioned that the FAFSA recognizes that there's different family combinations filling out this form. And so this really gives students a chance to designate and parents to designate who they are and who they're filling this out for. There have been a number of updates to the mobile app during the past year. People who use the mobile app will need to update their app after October 1st for the 2022-2023 FAFSA to be submitted. There's a new look and feel and some new features that they were previewing last year that have happened this year. And I figured rather than showing you lots of screenshots, maybe I'll just play this video for you. Great, so let's move on with some of the other changes coming up. Of course, the IRS data retrieval tool is available for students who are filing the FAFSA, both using a computer and a mobile site, but also using the mobile app. And they can begin using that when the new FAFSA becomes available for 22-23 on October 1st, 2021. And data is available both in English and in Spanish for that. Boy, there's a lot of updates this year. And so for today, I think we're going to just do a high level overview, keeping in mind time and your busy schedules. But in addition to what we're covering today, there were federal updates around negotiated rulemaking, distance education and innovation, certification procedures, and gainful employment. And we're going to focus on highlighting a few of the items that may impact the learners that you work with today. So some of the COVID-19 waivers and flexibilities during the 21-22 school year, I think this was published in July of this year, it provided relief from all verification requirements except for the identity, statement of educational purpose, and high school completion status for the 21-22 award year. And the waiver applied no matter where institutions were in the verification process. And what the guidance from federal student aid said was that colleges could still collect information if they had conflicting information on the application. Say someone reported that their taxes paid were exactly the same as their adjusted gross income. Colleges could follow up on that information, but otherwise they were waiving the verification requirements. In addition, you may remember that last year, federal student aid offered guidance on the use of professional judgment that colleges and universities and trade schools who are Title IV eligible could use in determining financial aid. There was some additional use, there's some additional information about the use of information from the Department of Labor to adjust income for people who are unemployed. And one of the things that federal student aid said was, if you have a lot of professional judgments, that is not something we're going to look at and think that it's something that we need to look closer at your institution. We know everybody's going through this. And one of the things that they said about using information from the Department of Labor was that if you had a parent for a dependent student, or you had a student who was an independent student who could show from their Department of Labor that they were currently collecting unemployment, then they could adjust, that aid offices could adjust that earned income for that person down to zero, based on that verification and that information and documentation from the Department of Labor, and that having that information on file would satisfy federal student aid requirements. There were also a bunch of legislative updates that happened. There was the Stop Student Debt Relief Scams Act that was actually signed into effect in December of 2020. And that put forth criminal sanctions, as well as preventing improper access for some of those bad actors, if you will, in trying to get money for people to get debt relief. We know that students can get debt relief without having to pay money in working with federal student aid. In addition, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, which also passed in December of 2020, included the Title IV program appropriations, like how much the maximum federal Pell Grant would be for the 21-22 school year, and also the FAFSA Simplification Act, which was really big news. And so one of the things that was talking about was coordination with the IRS as part of the Future Act. And so some of the things that are in the works are an automatic data exchange for the FAFSA form to make that a lot easier for students in this process. The ability to get information automatically regarding income-driven repayment plans from the IRS, and also as a way to confirm income for total and permanent disability discharge. Those are all things that will be coming with increased communication and more seamless communication with the IRS. So let's talk some more about the FAFSA Simplification Act. One of the things we learned is that this is probably going to come about as a timeline. Some things will be happening. Some things happened for the current award year that we're in, 21-22. Some more things will happen for 2023, 2022, 2023, and then moving up to the 2024-2025 school years. So these changes will not all happen at once. They want to, the U.S. Department of Education is working with Congress to allow federal student aid to have that flexibility. It's a phased approach, and it's going to improve the delivery of student financial aid, definitely. But at the same time, being able to still offer the FAFSA to folks, being able to still manage development timelines. And it looks like there's going to be like some changes to the central processing system that the FAFSA uses. And so we will see those changes coming about. Let's talk about the things that happened this year. So there was the repeal of the subsidized usage limited applied calculation, SULA. This has been in existence since 2013, and it basically said that after 150% enrollment in a degree program, a student could lose their student loan subsidy, right? The ability with the subsidized student loan to have that money not accruing interest, that borrowing not accruing interest. And so that has changed in this school year. They have repealed that. Additionally, they are removing the negative consequences around having a drug conviction while receiving federal student aid, or the failure to register for selective service. In this case, those questions about drug convictions while receiving federal aid and registering with selective service, those questions are still on the FAFSA for 21-22. They will be on the FAFSA for 2022-2023 school years, but those questions will not have an impact on a student's federal student aid. So that is a big change. People still have to answer those questions, but they're not going to impact student aid. Additionally, it's important for me to add, it is still the law that students who were assigned the sex male at birth have to register with selective service upon their 18th birthday. That's still the law. It's just that federal student aid is no longer tied to that registration. This is something that won't be happening in the upcoming cycle, so 2022-23, and it possibly might not be happening next. But I know that you've probably heard some rumblings that the EFC is going to be replaced by something called the Student Aid Index, or SAI. So let's talk a little bit about what we know so far about it. The EFC will change to this thing called the SAI, and it's used to determine the amount of Pell Award for amounts less than the maximum Pell. There's going to be a whole different calculation for determining maximum Pell eligibility. And the federal Pell Grant eligibility will also follow a different formula than we've been familiar with in the past. It'll be, the Student Aid Index will hopefully be simplified. This is tied to FAFSA simplification because the FAFSA will have less questions to answer on it. And so less criteria will be used to determine that SAI. It will only include information that's available from the IRS. And it will also change what counts as assets and how assets are treated in this calculation. And some of the fine details are remaining to be seen, but we know these basic things. The SAI could be a negative number. The EFC in the past, the minimum EFC you could get was 0, but the SAI could actually turn out to be negative. And an auto zero student aid index is available for those who are not required to file federal tax returns, as well as those who qualify for the maximum Pell Grant. So there have been a number of COVID-19 waivers and flexibilities with Pell Grant, and that is included here. The Pell Grant eligibility will not be based on the SAI. The maximum Pell Grant will be determined basically by adjusted gross income, household size, and poverty guidelines set forth each year. The eligibility for the Pell Grant could be impacted by the SAI, for instance, if they're not eligible for the maximum Pell. Also, this will allow Pell Grants for otherwise eligible students who maybe are incarcerated, but they're enrolled in an eligible prison education program. And right now, there are a number of pilot programs that are going on across the country, but we're looking at that Pell Grant provision actually for incarcerated students to be much more wide-based. So the other thing, the Pell Lifetime Eligibility used, LEU, Federal Student Aid, like many government agencies, really likes their acronyms. And so there's this restoration. And so you may know that Pell Grant eligibility is limited to 12 full-time semesters or the equivalent. And under the FAFSA Simplification Act, it would restore eligibility for students who were unable to complete a course of study because their school closed. If the student's previous eligibility for the Pell Grant was falsely certified, or when the Pell Grant recipient also had a loan discharge due to borrower defense. If your school, for instance, an example of that, if your school misled you or engaged in other misconduct in violation with certain state laws, a student can be eligible for this thing called borrower defense to loan repayment. And so that's what they mean by borrower defense. So I know I covered a lot in a short period of time. Do we have any questions?
Harry, we just had a great question come in the chat. There's a couple actual questions built into this. The first part is, do you anticipate more students being eligible for the Pell Grant or less? And then the second part is, will parent assets still be largely protected?
Okay, both of those are really great questions. Let's see. In everything I've read about FAFSA simplification, there's belief that more needy students will be eligible for the federal Pell Grant based on these changes. However, there will be, as there are with all changes, there will be people who are considered winners and losers in this. So Some people will benefit greatly from these changes, and some people may not benefit as much. And I think that might remain to be seen. But you'll notice that one of the things we were talking about with this SAI that was not mentioned was number of college students in the household. It's really AGI and number of people living on that income. So it is entirely possible that while some people will see increased Pell eligibility, some people might see decreased aid eligibility. So we'll have to see what that looks like. Assets, I think, will be pretty largely protected for people who are eligible for that zero SAI or for that maximum Pell Grant eligibility, because again, it's talking about adjusted gross income and number of family members living on that income. So I think that in some ways, assets may not be looked at very much in federal student aid calculations for a number of families, but it will remain to be seen how assets are looked at in determining that SAI that's not maximum Pell Grant. So I hate to say stay tuned, but stay tuned.
I think that's all the questions right now.
Wonderful. So I'm going to hand this off to Stacy King, and Stacy will get us started with talking about Vermont grants.
Yes, and I lucked out. I got the easier sections with fewer updates for state grants and scholarships. So let's jump right in. A reminder that Vermont grants are also income dependent like the FAFSA, but use a different calculation. So we encourage people who apply, even if you were not eligible for a federal Pell Grant, to go ahead and apply for the state grant because you may be eligible for the state grant. Go ahead and move forward. So our degree grant application, same as each year, will be available October 1st for the upcoming 22-23 year. You want to make sure you choose the year that you want the money for. And you can apply in a couple of different ways. Still, you can connect directly from the FAFSA if your pop-ups are allowed. That will drop you right into the My VSAC portal. Or you can go to vsac.org and click on the My VSAC button in the top right, which you can see on the screen circled below. And all of them they're going to bring you to the place where you will either create a My VSAC account or log in if you already have created one. All right, and sorry, I just realized my computer is going to close down on me for power, so 1 second. Okay, fixed that. We were able to institute auto renewal last year for Vermont degree. And so if a student has a completed Vermont grant application on file and submits a 22-23 FAFSA, they will automatically be eligible and renewed for that Vermont degree grant, and their application will be processed. But it's really important that if a custodial parent has changed for a dependent student, if a student has moved from dependency to independency because they got married or aged out, if they are a medical or veterinary student at UVM, or if they were not a Vermont resident the previous year, that they remember to go in and file a new Vermont grant application, because without that, the assumption will be that the situation is the same as the previous year. So if it has changed, they should go in and file a Vermont degree grant. And the uploader is still available in the My VSAC portal, where you can upload tax documents and W-2s. Most of the worksheets that the Vermont grant may ask for will be the ability to submit them right within your My VSAC portal. You can still print things out and mail them in. And if there are special circumstances, it should be communicated in writing to that Vermont grant program, whether that's email or literal mail. Some students and some parents and some schools are not aware that communicating with the college VSAC will not know what you did there. And if you communicate with VSAC, your college may not know what happened there. So it's really important to communicate with both. And they're anticipating to award in April, as we do most years. For fiscal year 21, the grant system awarded nearly $21 million. And that was over 7,000 full-time grants with an average of about $2,100 and 2,700 part-time grants with an average of $760. So there's a significant amount of state money that's awarded every year, and we encourage people to apply. And every year we see students who have completed a FAFSA and not completed a Vermont grant. And we're trying to catch those students. So make sure they know that there is a state grant opportunity. Okay. And the 802 opportunity that Marilyn Cargill mentioned earlier, if a student is attending CCV and is eligible for 802 opportunity, they will see it in their My VSAC portal. And you can see here that this is an example of a student where they've been awarded a degree, a Vermont degree grant, state grant, but then the difference in what remains in their tuition is the 802 opportunity amount, which you can see listed right below that. And remember, 802 opportunity does not require any separate application. It's just completion of the FAFSA and Vermont grant applications for a student attending CCV. And the FAFSA completion tool, is available to all of the schools that have signed an MOU with VSAC, a memorandum of understanding, and the high school gets their own My VSAC account. And if they upload a list of their seniors, they can see for that list of students, was a FAFSA received? If so, what date it was submitted and the date it was processed. If there is no date it was processed, that means that the student is missing something and has not, needs to go back into their FAFSA. You will also see the date the Vermont grant application was received. And again, if there is no date, they didn't do it or didn't complete it. And you will also see if the student was selected for verification. And that means they have additional paperwork that their colleges will request in order to process their federal aid. You will not see any information about income or about anything about the family other than was the FAFSA submitted and when, was the grant submitted and when, and did the student get pulled for verification. So we definitely would encourage, if your school does not have their own My VSAC portal, to reach out to VSAC. We also have an advancement grant, and it's one of the unique items in Vermont. We're one of the only states that offers grants for students that are exploring non-college credit-based opportunities or want to take 1 or 2 college classes to try things out. This advancement grant runs slightly different than a traditional academic year. So we are currently still taking advancement grant applications and will continue to do that up through until we either exceed the pool of money or up until June 30th of the current academic year, so June 30th of 2022. For students that are looking for a course that begins July 1 or later of 2022, that application will become available in May, we hope, or possibly June. They do still need a My VSAC account, and if for any case a student forgets their My VSAC info, we really encourage them to follow the prompts to reset their password and or call VSAC to get into their account and not to create a new account. For any Vermont grant opportunity, a student can have a maximum of 2 state grants in any given year, whether that is 2 degree grants, a degree grant and advancement grant, or 2 terms of advancement grant. And for advancement grant in particular, there is a limit in the year of $3,000 of eligibility. Questions for the Vermont grant part? We didn't really talk about micro grants. Marilyn had mentioned them earlier. We did award over $136,000 of micro grant awards last year. And just a reminder that if a student is experiencing an emergency situation, to refer them to a VSAC counselor or to the college's financial aid counselor. All of us can nominate for micro grant. Do we have any questions, Susie?
We do have a couple. The first one here, I answered it a little in the chat, but I thought it would be great for group clarification. It is, do you find that students are filing new Vermont grant applications when they have those changes? And those changes are dependency, custodial parent, etc. Or is that something that for many is getting caught further down the line and tripping some students up? So I think the question is really, are some students just getting auto-renewed and then getting caught because something has changed with their information?
I think it's hard to know if we've missed anyone because we wouldn't know unless they let us know something was different. So I'm sure that there are students every year that should file a new Vermont grant and let us know the new circumstances, but we don't know. We don't know until they know that something needs to be done.
And actually, I'll pipe in and say also, that's a great reason why it's always good for a student to work with one of our outreach team to help them with filing these forms, because we're really great at asking these questions and catching some of these issues that come up for students. We have a couple more questions. Does a student have to be 18 or older to apply for the advancement grant?
No, they have to be separated from the traditional high school. So if a student left high school at the age of 16 and has been out for 3 months or more, they can be eligible for an advancement grant. They would still be considered a dependent student unless they meet the other criteria to be independent. But no, they do not have to be 18. It is not age dependent.
Right. All right, and one more question here. As a student financial aid counselor, do we just email VSAC to nominate a student for a microgrant?
You would reach out to an outreach counselor. So if your school has an outreach counselor attached, you would reach to that counselor. If they do not, then you would reach out to the EOC team, and we would be happy to work with that student. If the student already has committed to a college, that college financial aid counselor can also do it if it is a Vermont school.
Great. I think that's all we have right now. Thanks, Stacy.
Great. So I'm also going to update on the scholarship section, so we can move to that section. Just a reminder, sometimes people are not aware of the size of the scholarships that VSAC gives out for fiscal year 21. It was over 165 unique scholarships with nearly $6 million awarded to more than 2,400 unique individuals. So this program is helping a lot of Vermonters across the state. The booklet for the upcoming year 22-23 will be available soon, and the online application is actually available now already. Sorry, the booklet is available now. The application will open October 1st for the new fiscal year 22-23. But if a student is raring to go, they can read that Scholarship for Vermonters booklet immediately. They use that same My VSAC account to apply for the scholarships, as well as that's where they would have applied for a Vermont grant or part-time grant or the advancement grant. My VSAC is also where they can apply for a private loan if needed. So VSAC assisted scholarships right in the My VSAC portal. The deadline for this coming school year is February 11th, 2022 at midnight. All the application and all of the supporting materials have to be postmarked or uploaded by midnight. And it's a two-part process if you are uploading. The Unified Scholarship application is completed by the student. And when the student has done that, schools that have a My VSAC portal can then upload supporting documents such as a transcript or letters of recommendation. If a student does not complete the USA, the school is not able to upload things. The school can still mail those materials and have them postmarked by that date. And we know that last day, there's always students running into the office saying, please, can you write me a letter of recommendation, or can you send in my transcript? And so we would encourage schools that if you believe a student is going to upload their USA by midnight that day, go ahead and mail the letter of recommendation or the transcript in. That is fine. The FAFSA is required, and it has to be completed by that deadline of February 11th for any scholarships that have a financial need requirement. And this is what a student's My VSAC home screen would look like. You can see the different places that you would apply. You would click to work with grants or loans, and we have highlighted the scholarships button there. And so when they click that, they will see the opportunity to submit a scholarship application. And once they have submitted the scholarship application, that upload scholarship documents option will become live. We'll allow them to upload and post. And they will be able to see what they have submitted. So if they look at their required documents, as you can see on the left, then there's the option to upload items if they needed to put an essay in, for example. And there's also the list of what has already been received by VSAC. Previous years, items that were mailed in were not listed in this, and that is, as far as I know, still going to be the case this year. We don't have a mechanism to indicate that it's there. However, a student can certainly call VSAC and ask if their mailed items have been received. Do I still have that correct, Carrie?
100%, Stacy.
Excellent. Awesome. All right, so keep moving forward. So this is what a student will see if they click scholarships, they will see what they were awarded. Typically notification happens in late April. We do our very best to notify students before May 1st, which is a traditional decision date for many colleges. And they will see a list of the scholarships that they were awarded and what they were not selected for but applied for. There will not be a mailing of sorry, you didn't get this scholarship. It will just be listed in their My VSAC portal. And just a reminder, Marilyn did mention the Curtis Credential of Value and Adult Career and Technical Education scholarships that students who are working with the EOC counselors can potentially be nominated for. So we would encourage anybody to refer to us, students that are leaving, that have left the high school, traditional high school situation, or will be. You can refer us students in the summer in May or June. And the students will need to meet with an EOC counselor and also apply for either the advancement grant or Vermont grant in order to show income eligibility. The Adult Career and Technical Education Scholarship does have much more flexible criteria, and students that applied for an advancement grant or a Vermont grant but were not eligible could still be nominated for a Career and Technical Education Scholarship. And that, of the $6 million of scholarships, over 155,000 of that was Curtis Credential of Value scholarships last year. Helping students pursue things that were not necessarily college degree related, but could be things like an LNA or a truck driver's license or many, many other really amazing opportunities. Okay, and we're at questions for scholarships.
No questions in the chat.
Yeah, I said I got the easy ones. Not a lot of changes for Vermont grant or scholarships process. But if any other questions come up, of course, feel free to put them in the chat.
Stacy, can I add one update for
Sure.
VSAC scholarships? What we wanted to let you know is that students will this year only have the ability to upload one recommendation letter number 1. In the past, they could upload multiple. So there are a couple of scholarships that VSAC administers that requires more than one recommendation number 1 for scholarships. So those students could mail that second letter in if need be, or they can, and I think they've got it turned on so that they can upload the second recommendation for those particular scholarships. But for other scholarships that only require one recommendation number 1, students will only be able to upload one.
Excellent. That is definitely an update that I forgot. Thank you, Carrie.
Actually, I'll pipe in with a quick update too, if we have a second, is just because the electronic version of the booklet has come out with all the VSAC assisted scholarships. I don't know if folks have had a chance to look through, but I was just really pleasantly surprised to see a number of new scholarships in there. So if you're used to going through it and seeing a lot of the same ones, it is really worth a read through. Some great new opportunities throughout the state for alternative programs, traditional programs, reaching a wider variety of students. It was really exciting to see.
Yeah, that's a great update because I think there's a misconception that these scholarships are primarily for high school seniors. And there's actually a lot of different scholarships for many, many different students. Excellent. Back to Carrie.
Agreed. So let's do some education loan updates. One of the things that we have talked about in this training in the past was that annual student loan acknowledgement. And a number of years ago, federal student aid said that students were going to, at some point, have to acknowledge that they saw their annual student loan borrowing and that they saw that information and they clicked a button to say, yes, I understand. And that was going to be a requirement before federal student aid could be dispersed. And initially they had said it would be I think the 2019-2020 year, and then they went to 2020-21. They have announced that borrower completion of this acknowledgement at federal student aid in order to get federal aid dispersed will not be required for the 2021-2022 award year. Interestingly enough, they did not say whether or not it will be required for 2022-2023. Stay tuned. We might get an update on that. But that student loan acknowledgement is available at studentaid.gov. It's a nice little tool for students and parents to be able to look at to see the total amount of borrowing that they have done thus far. As you may remember, in the past, a student would do their entrance counseling, and then generally they would get their notification about the new student loan being dispersed each year, but they really wouldn't see something about total borrowing until exit counseling. And so this student loan acknowledgement was a nice interim measure to help students keep track of where they were. Marilyn Cargill actually talked about this, but since the last time we met, there have been a number of federal loans updates and based on the CARES Act. And there's been these extensions and these expansions. But the important thing is that this August, the Department of Education did announce that the final extension of the student loan pause would happen until January 31st of 2022. And in that announcement, they said that this was to allow borrowers to begin to plan for those student loan payments and the interest accruing to begin happening again. And they can make plans in order to deal with that. Updated interest rates for federal loans are here, as well as origination fees. Origination fees are something that's withheld from the loan that helps cover the cost of servicing that loan. So for instance, if a student borrowed $5,500, they aren't necessarily getting $5,500 toward their bill. I think it's this year something like $5,542 that actually gets paid toward their bills. Origination fees are really important for borrowers because if you're planning on borrowing, whether it's a direct subsidized loan or unsubsidized loan or direct plus loan, it's really important to remember if you're planning right to the dollar that there are these origination fees that are being withheld.
Carrie, could I have you review that? Because if they borrowed $5,500, they would be getting less than $5,500.
Yeah, I'm sorry, $5,442. Did I say something more?
Yes, but that's okay.
Sorry. $5,442. I actually did the math, like took out a calculator, figured it out. And so sorry if I misspoke. Thanks for correcting that. So student loan options, we really encourage students that if they're thinking about borrowing, the thing that they want to do is accept the federal loans first. for student borrowing. The interest rates tend to be better. There are lots of protections available, and that is a fixed interest rate for that year's borrowing. But each year on July 1st, the U.S. Department of Education will set a new interest loan rate. So a student borrowing for the 2021-2022 school year has an interest rate of 3.73%, and that loan has that interest rate. But for 2022, 2023, that loan will have probably a new interest rate, and that will be the fixed rate for that loan. When you think about it, a student could have, in a 4-year degree program, a student could have potentially 8 different loans between subsidized and unsubsidized, as well as each year. Parent loan options, just wanted to show you these. The plus loan for parents, the current interest rate, again, for families looking for funding for the 2022-2023 school year, they will have a different interest rate. The federal student loans, as well as the federal plus loan, are tied to the FAFSA. The plus loan may or may not be part of a student's financial aid notification, but that loan is in a parent's name, and parents can borrow the difference between the cost of attendance of the school minus the financial aid offered. So it's really the parents who decide how much they can afford to borrow. There's a credit check, but not a traditional credit check. They're just looking at, is there a good repayment history? So it's not awarded based on a family's ability to pay. So something to keep in mind. Additionally, there are, non-federal alternative loans, also called private loans. Those lenders can include nonprofits like us, like VSAC. And we have the VSAC Advantage loan, both for students and for parents. Our interest rates are fixed, and they're based on when the student or parent chooses to begin repayment. But choosing a loan can be confusing. And so I just wanted to make a plug for our My Education Loans Guide. It's information about what to know before students borrow. And, any student who is thinking about additional borrowing, or parents thinking about additional borrowing, might be good to look at this, this publication that we have at VSAC. It was one that was developed with financial aid offices, as well as students and parents, to help people understand things. You can also go to vsac.org/learn for this loan guide, calculators to compare total costs, and more information about our loans. And again, we mentioned that the My VSAC portal is the place where students can access that. If a student is borrowing a VSAC Advantage loan, a Vermont Advantage loan, then it's going to be important that not only the student have a My VSAC account, but their co-signer would also need a separate My VSAC account in order to fill out the co-signature paperwork online. And there are a lot of helpful repayment calculators on the web. Mapping Your Future has this great debt to salary wizard, which I love using with students to determine how much salary a student would need to earn in order to pay off their loan at a standard repayment 10 years. The College Board Big Future site has a great parent loan advisor to help parents determine how much plus loan they can borrow based on their income and their current debt that they're carrying. We also, on our VSAC financial aid videos page, we have a recent VSAC shows you how event that was recorded regarding choosing an education loan. That's from this past June. And also there is a loan simulator on studentaid.gov, which helps students to look at a number of different federal student loan repayment options to see which one might be right for them, and what their payments might look like as they approach going into repayment, or they approach graduation. Any questions about loan updates?
No questions about loans so far, but there was a question put in the chat related to work study that I attempted to answer, but thought it might be helpful to discuss as a group. It says, can you explain how work study works? Does the money earned go to the student or toward their bill?
So that's a great question. And I think wonderful to ask that. Traditionally, work study is a situation where a student would find a job on campus or with their college, And that job, they have to work the hours and they do get paid a check by check for their work study. Now, the student could choose to take that work study check and walk it down to the school financial services office and use that money to pay their bill. But I think a lot of times students are using that work study money to do things like, do their laundry, to save toward books the next semester, to take care of supplies that they might have a need for while they're at school. So traditionally, work study is earned by the student and then they get a paycheck. Great. So I'm going to move on to some information resources that we have. The first one is our EdPro news page. That is a great page for educational professionals to bookmark. We have a lot of information there, including that little purple bar, which you can't see very well, is a link to order our most recent publications. And so that is something that is really helpful for folks. If you need scholarship books, if you need our financial or our FAFSA completion document that we have, go ahead and go on there and you can order those things for your school, for your agency, for your college aid office. In addition, there is a financial aid resources page, and a lot of the things that we talked about today are on that page. Additionally, the videos from these workshops are going to be posted. The slide decks are posted there. And there's also really helpful information from federal student aid, like who's a dependent or independent, or which parent's information should I use on the FAFSA. That is all information that can be found on that financial aid resources page. Another great thing to maybe bookmark. And I mentioned the VSAC publication orders. You can go to publications, vsac.org, and you can also find that information there. We do have digital versions of a number of our publications that maybe you could use for your website. You can also track the shipping status, and you can also receive order reminders from VSAC. The FAFSA demo system is something that some people use. I use it. I know a number of other counselors that use it, but it basically is a test site that you can use to try out the FAFSA for the coming year. That's going to be available on September 26th. There's a username and password that's here. I should mention that username and password doesn't change, but you can actually go through and see all of the questions and work your way through it if you'd like to see it. Unfortunately, there's no app, there's no demo for the mobile app, and you are not able to connect to IRS data retrieval using the demo system, but you can actually see what it's like for people just data entering the information in. And finally, federal student aid has a bunch of channels. And the one that I would highly recommend that I don't have posted on here is the financial aid toolkit. But if you Google FSA financial aid toolkit, it will take you right to that page. And they have a lot of great information, recordings of webinars, handouts, social media recommendations, all sorts of things that you can use in helping to increase FAFSA filing and help people with the federal student aid process, like the entire process from start to finish. And then there's also all of these federal student aid channels that you can borrow, you can link to, you can share posts, which is also really helpful. And finally, you probably don't have questions about resources, but just a quick wrap up. I know we're rapidly running out of time. I want to respect the fact that we told you we would be done at 11. Any quick questions as we finish up and I show you Stacy's and my contact information?
No more questions in the chat.
Okay, wonderful. I want to thank you all for attending today and for giving us your attention. Again, some of you, if you pre-registered, you received a copy of the slide deck maybe in your email from us. And you will also get a link to the recording afterward, but you can find that on our financial aid resources page. And thank you very much. And I hope to see you either virtually or in our travels.